Welcome back to the No Trade Clause podcast, live from Summer League. I'm Neil Gagna, and this is Colin Marr, also from No Trade Clause. Today we have the opportunity to sit down with former front office executive and current ESPN Insider Bobby Marks. How are you enjoying your time out here so far, Bobby?
I'm doing good, guys. We got a good Victor game today on Sunday, and it felt like he was a lot more comfortable than he was on Friday here. But yeah, Summer League's going well so far.
Awesome. Yep, we definitely enjoyed that game as well. Bobby, let's jump right into it. So this offseason was unlike any in recent memory because it brought with it the introduction of a brand new CBA. In your experience, how did teams consume a new CBA so quickly?
Well, fortunately, everyone got a term sheet at the end of April, early May. You had, basically a 2-month window to kind of digest as much as you can. The CBA actually didn't come out until right until the start of free agency here. But how the new rules are written is that most of the harsh restrictions are coming into effect next offseason here, and it gave every team to kind of figure out where their finances are. But because of the term sheet that came out, and you were able to have a baseline of what the rules were. In 2011, we had a lockout when I was in New Jersey, and it got resolved right around, December 1st. Free agency started December 14th, and that was a whole new CBA of brand.
Wow.
Everything
Yeah.
was new. These rules are more of an amendment of 2011 and 17, and now 2023 here, and so you're seeing some teams being more cautious. I think we haven't seen that in a long time. I think we've heard a lot about the first apron and the second apron and spending and what teams are restricted of, and I've said next year is when Phoenix will feel more of the pain.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, you won't be able to go and buy picks in the draft, and your draft pick will get frozen and things like that here. But yeah, you just try to digest it as much as you can. And I always say that you go through like life experiences. Anybody can sit and read 680 pages of CBA.
Yep.
But you got to go through the actual experiences of going through and whether it be the extension rules are changed or the extend and trade, or some of the renegotiation rules are tweaked a little bit here. But fortunately that now everyone starting in probably August will really dive into the CBA as far as what's changed.
So after you had some time to digest the CBA, what was your biggest takeaway from the new CBA? And did you notice any significant changes this offseason based on the offseason market due to that CBA?
I think what I noticed is that we had about 7 or 8 teams that had cap space. Certainly Houston went out and spent, and a lot of the other teams went out and rented. I call it cap space. You saw teams, the minimum salary rule, which you have to spend 90% of the salary cap, which is salary cap's 136. You've got to spend up to 122. That's always been the rule. What's different this year is that if you don't spend that by the first day of the regular season, then you're not getting 50% of the tax distribution. The following year, you're not getting any amount. So if this was a year ago, San Antonio would have lost out on $15 million. You've seen more teams spend different ways. We've noticed more extensions. The extension rules are more flexible. DeJounte Murray just extended. Under the old rules, it would have been, it's $16 million less.
Wow.
You're seeing more of that there. But all in all, I think there's more parity. You see teams like Miami forced to, you can keep Gabe Vincent and Max Strus, but you're going to pay a significant penalty. And how do I parlay one of them into a trade exception or a draft pick here? And it's forcing teams. Grant Williams, the same thing in Boston, is that it's really not about this year. It's about next year when Jaylen Brown's Supermax, if he signs it, kicks in, and then the following year when Jason Tatum, and it goes from there.
And how much do you think it's going to affect the free agent market? How easy it is to extend these guys, the flexibility in that area. It seems like there's going to be almost no free agent market anymore.
I don't think we'll ever see a time when 2019 Kyrie and Kevin Durant go and sign in Brooklyn. I would be stunned if we ever get to that point, because Adrian Wojnarowski made a good point. He said it's kind of like the transfer portal.
Yeah, right.
You extend, get your money, and then in 2 years from now, if things aren't going well, both sides can go in a different direction here, and we'll still have free agency. But I always say the best way to, or the smart way to build a roster is, go through the draft, go through the trade market, and then use free agency here, because sometimes when you've got $60 million burning in your pocket, you make some wrong decisions here that will come and cost you.
Yeah, especially with the minimum team salary rule now, because you can't even wait till the end of the year and hopefully, at the trade deadline, hopefully wait that someone's desperate and dumping salary at that point.
So you mentioned free agency. A lot of times people view the second round of the draft as free agency. If you were in a front office right now, how would you treat the value of a second round draft pick? So in this CBA we saw they added the second round exception, but then they also added a third two-way spot. If you were in a front office, how would you value those second round picks now?
I would be hesitant making, at the trade deadline, moving three second round picks for a player that could maybe help and then lose them in free agency. Or I think the value of, you mentioned the second round exception, and what we've seen so far is we've had 12 players sign, 12 of the second round picks sign contracts for 4 years. And last year we had 5.
Wow.
The thing that's a little bit in that gray area that, and this is going about learning the CBAs, and when the second round exception rule came out, it basically, if you're going to sign a player for 4 years on a 4-year contract, it starts at 2 years of service, and then it goes, and then the last year is a team option, and the same thing for if it's a 3-year contract, it's a 1 year of service. That's the number here. What the term sheet didn't say was that's negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
Like
it's up to.
It's up to.
Mm-hmm.
It's not at. And that's what I think what's cost, because the majority of them have been at that 1-1 number, these 0 years of service, and the agents teams have kind of held that over their head. Oh, well, we're going to give you 4 years, but we're going to start you at 1-1, and there's been very few of those type contracts here. But going back to that point, you saw Denver really take a proactive approach this year in the second round, go out and get two picks, and they got in the first round. Golden State, certainly with Trace Jackson Davis, at 57, I think.
Yep. Teams
value second round picks here, whether it be players that are in college for 3 or 4 years, the extra two-way spot. And what you didn't see this year is a lot of Europeans picked in the second round, like the draft and stash players, because you're relying on those players to kind of come out and try to help you right now.
We saw the 57th pick, to your point, sign a standard contract, and even the 58th pick sign a standard contract. Do you think that will kind of reset the market a little bit for, what the lower picks are looking for, maybe less inclined to sign a two-way?
Well, Kobe Jones at 34 got the full thing. He got the 4-year contract, and then starting at the 2 years of service, and then I think the last year may have been a team option. And so if you're Julian Phillips, or if you're one of these other picks, in James Najee, for example, who's got picked, I think, 32 by Charlotte, you're like, that's the contract I want. And teams are like, no, this is what we're going to do. And Phillips sat out a game because they were in a little bit of a stalemate, and eventually got resolved. It's going to be interesting how it plays out as far as the second round. I think it's great. I really do, because what you saw was you had to dip into your mid-level or your tax mid-level, and for a team like the Lakers, Max Christie, you could only sign him to a two-year deal. Now it gives you the flexibility. Now the other thing too is, and here's going back to like learning the CBA, what the term sheet didn't say also is that for players that are drafted or second round exceptions, their salary doesn't count until July 31st for right now. And so that's all about kind of just, sitting down in a 3-week stretch and really just diving deep. But as I said, the term sheet got you through, but now it's kind of like, the really like the fine tuning of everything.
Right.
Absolutely. So one of the other big penalties that we saw added into the CBA, which starts a year from now, is the frozen draft pick rule, where teams can't trade their first-round pick 7 years out if they're over the second apron. And if they continue to be over, that pick also moves to the end of the first round. What were your thoughts on that new penalty, and how do you think teams will respond to that?
Well, it's funny, like, you talk to people who have a vested interest in Phoenix, like, oh, we're good. We already traded through 2030. I'm like, no. It starts in 2032, right? Like, that's how
That's a pick you can't access yet, right?
Exactly.
Right.
So it's not, for anyone who's watching it, there's a 7-year rule, right?
Right.
So right now we're operating between 2024 and 2030. You can't trade picks in back-to-back years. So 2032, I like the frozen pick. I mean, I get it. Phoenix probably wouldn't have been able to add Durant. I mean, they would have been able to do Durant, but couldn't add a fourth pick there. I think what's interesting is on paper, if you had the 13th pick and now you got to pick 30, but you got to make a conservative effort to spend. I mean, you got to be in there basically 3 out of 5 years.
Yep.
Like, you got, like, Phoenix, we'll see what happens there. Like, they might be the team that is there. But you really have to make an effort to go out for you to put. But it's interesting, though, if you have, if this roster, gets older and more expensive, then 2032, Phoenix will pay the price for what they're trying to accomplish right now. Same with, we saw them do this pick swap in 2024 with Memphis, where they're basically saying in 2030 they're betting on themselves that we're going to have a good team and we want more draft assets that we don't have, and we're willing to do a pick swap in later years.
Right.
So do you think that some of these teams that are going to be over the second apron at the moment, they may continue to be over the second apron like a Phoenix, but do you see them maybe planning to get under for long enough afterwards to unfreeze that pick?
Well, I mean, I just go back to my experience in Brooklyn, that we were probably the team that, way back when in 2013-14, when we spent, I think our luxury tax bill was like $90 million, which was ridiculously high. Our payroll was 100. And then what happens is you lose in the second round.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, be like, well, how do we start trim back? How do we get back under the second apron? How do we? And that's why the off season, I always say, is we're in this honeymoon period. Everything looks great and everything. And then when you start playing, things change a little bit. And it'll be interesting in Phoenix, because they went all in with Durant, and then they went double all in with Bradley Beal, and they've kind of they've really pushed the envelope here. They've done everything the right way here, but if it doesn't work, like, they're going to pay the price.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be a tough, stretch there.
Well, and I wonder if the frozen picks are going to deter the teams, or the massive repeater tax that the increase in the tax penalty is going to do that more, because that's where it's really going to hurt the owner.
That's a good point. I mean, so the tax penalties are the same right now for the next 2 years. The brackets will expand a little bit here. Like, right now we're at 0 to 5 million here. That could go like 0 to 5.2 based on the growth of the cap here. What you're going to see is in 2 years from now, so we're in 25-26, the tax penalties are going to be very stringent here. Not for teams that are just in. So if you're just in the tax, it's like basically a dollar for dollar. It's like back to the old days here. But to give you an example, Golden State, if this was 2 years from now, instead of having a $180 million tax penalty, it would be like $270.
Yeah.
Wow,
So I mean, that's the goal there as far as to penalty. What I would have loved to seen was, if you're $3 million in the tax, you can still get a portion of the distribution back.
Right.
So it makes you spend a little bit, because teams use that as a little bit of a hard cap.
Yeah.
As far as we're not going in. We saw Miami last year; they were like right up against it until they moved Dedmon to San Antonio, and they're like, we're not going in, because you do want that big distribution.
Well, and that's the thing. Fans think, oh, it's only going to be a $X million tax bill. It's not that much, but no, you're also not sharing in the revenue now.
That's right.
You're getting knocked out of that.
So Bobby, let's pivot to specific teams. So the first team we want to start with was Miami. Let's assume Damian Lillard, gets his druthers and finds his way to Miami. What do you think that means for Miami's future outlook and their options of potentially trying to improve their team moving forward after taking on his 4 years and over $200 million remaining?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if any team can do it, it's Miami, just because of, with Duncan Robinson and Strus and Gabe Vincent and guys they've been able to kind of resurrect or find players that have gone undrafted here, because the price will be, they'll take a hit to their roster. And you'll have 3 players on max contracts with Lillard, Bam, and Jimmy. what's left.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to have Hero and probably Robinson or Lowry, and you're probably going to lose some of those younger players, and then certainly draft picks here. And then so now you have the 3 max guys. They would join Phoenix and Denver, and then eventually Minnesota, as far as how to build around them. And you're basically looking at the veteran minimum players here to add to that roster, and it puts a lot of pressure on your front office here. We might see Denver go through it with Michael Porter Jr. As I said, like, if you're going to do 3 guys, you better make sure that third guy is like really, really good here. And Miami will be interesting because I think they basically kind of drew a line in the sand as far as what the cost was going to be on Vincent and Strus, because in case a Lillard situation came along where you're basically adding more salary on.
And now they're kind of hurting themselves too this year because all those veterans that they could have gotten on the veteran minimum are gone too, right? So.
Well, that's the thing, is that they're basically in a little bit of a holding pattern here. They've got a couple roster spots open until that situation maybe gets resolved.
Right.
Shifting gears a little bit, let's look at the Boston Celtics. So what do you think could be holding up the Jaylen Brown Supermax extension?
Yeah, so he's, it's up to, could be up to 303 if the cap jumps to 149, which is the max is, 10%. It's interesting. There's been, I think, 11 or 12 guys who've signed a Supermax. Everyone has gotten the full thing except for Rudy Gobert. That would, because everyone says it, well, it's 35%. Well, it's up to, right? That's the word, up to. You can negotiate it here. And I think, what's the sticking point? Could it be a player option in the last year? Could it be that, Boston's not willing to go 35, and I don't think that's the case here. I think if that was the case, then I could see this playing out a little more. You have up until October 23rd to get a deal done. But it is interesting that we're 2 weeks into free agency. Usually we saw Jokic, Booker, Towns, boom, right off the bat, right? This is a little more interesting, and then you have Tatum the following year. That a deal has not been done. I'm expecting it to. I don't think it has anything to do with Lillard. As far as them trying to figure out, can we go get Dame? If we sign Jalen, he can't be traded for a year here. I just think it's a matter of whether it be a player option. And if I'm Boston, I'm saying, well, wait a minute, I'm giving you $300 million. Like, I want you for 5 years. I don't want in 4 you can become a free agent again.
Right.
Another team that was interesting was Philadelphia. Obviously, you got the Harden stuff, but they also wasted no time coming out and saying we will not be signing Tyrese Maxey to an extension this offseason. What do you think that they may be planning moving forward?
Based on next year's free agent class, hopefully it's not, the cap space. Listen, we love talking about cap space, right? It's fun. Who has cap space is the most overrated thing in the world. It really is. I mean, look at what Houston had to just go through. They basically traded 4 former first-round picks to create cap space or to make the Dylan Brooks trade and do all that. So I think I understand it. So Tyrese Maxey's rookie extension eligible because he was picked 21st. His cap hold is really low. It's like $13 million. You sign him for $30 million starting out, you lose $17 million off the bat. I understand that. I always say you can create cap space any way you want. You want to go move PJ Tucker and create an extra $8 million in room? You want to go move, someone else? I mean, I think the problem with it is that the roster, there's no other players to move because with Joel, and then I think Tucker's like the only one if they match the Paul Reed thing, maybe Paul. So it's not like you can say, well, we're going to go move 2 players making 20. Like, you're basically like, this is kind of who you are. And so I get it. I mean, there's a lot of risk involved. I think from the player standpoint, certainly, bypassing on that. It is interesting that they're pretty upfront as far as saying, you know what, we're going to table it. We're not going to, visit it here. The downside is that if, let's say, you were going to max Tyrese out, he loses the ability to earn All-NBA, and you see that, changed a little bit here. But yeah, that was pretty interesting.
From a front office perspective, and when we think about like the relationships between the team, the player, the agent, do you think by not entertaining that type of extension, you're damaging any of the relationship there?
No, I don't think so, because I think there's an understanding that he's part of the future, and we're going to lock him up long term. And maybe there's not a number of that. We're not going to talk numbers yet, but he's going to be taken care of here.
And then looking at the Harden situation, how do you see that playing out?
I think what Harden is that when we get to training camp in late September, October, I think he's going to be on a Sixer roster. I don't see. what the market is, whether it be expirings in a future here. I think Philadelphia is better with him on the roster, although they can lose him next year. And I think if you're Philly, can you afford to take a gap year? And everyone, I said it I did radio, and I said gap year, and everyone, all the Sixer fans got crazy because they said, they were 32 and 22 before, and Simmons was out the whole year, and before they just had Maxey and Joel, and I'm like, that's a little bit different circumstances than we are right now.
And as a former front office executive, what are your thoughts on these players constantly demanding trades? Is there ever a point where you're just saying you're under contract, there's really not a market that there's a fit, we're going to have you play under our contract?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a matter, are you asking to be traded, working with that player, and if things are not worked out, I'm expecting you to come to training camp.
Right.
And I'm expecting you to be a good teammate.
Right.
And we'll continue to work on it. I look at it, I mean, certainly I've worked in the front office and I see that. But then on the other side, I look at it like, all right, there's a handful of these players, but like for example, yesterday, like Ty Washington, he had no control over where he'd been traded like 3 different times.
Right.
He's in Atlanta, and now he's in Oklahoma City, and now he's all over the place here. And those are the guys like the front office, we talk about all these higher echelon players asking to be traded, but then there's also the other 90% who have no control as far as where they are, and sometimes teams use these players as pawns. Right? They fit the 125% rule.
Right.
Yeah.
And stuff. So I get it both ways, but I don't have an issue of a player. If I don't have an issue with Damian Lillard asking to be traded.
Right.
I have a little bit of an issue, certainly, up how, hey, we only have one team. It's only going to be one team. Give us 3 or 4 and let us work off that here. And don't box us in a corner with Miami saying, you know what, this is the only place he wants to come to. We're only going to give you 1 first-round pick instead of 2, and certainly, changes there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even with the agent coming out and saying he was calling teams, telling them don't trade for Dame. Like, never heard that as public in the past, right?
Yeah.
With the James Harden situation, in the event that he was traded, let's just say, the Clippers were reported at one time. Do you think that package would look like a bunch of expirings with picks and stuff, or do you think no, they probably want real assets that can help the team?
Well, I mean, it goes back to taking on back salary. So do you want Terrence Mann, who I think the Clippers would really have a hard time giving up? I mean, the Clippers have, whether it be Robert Covington or Marcus Morris or Nick Batum, and they've got some picks down the road here. I think that's what you're more looking at. I think if you're the Clippers, you don't want to do with anything with Terrence. You don't want to put Terrence Mann in because Harden's going to become a free agent, or some of maybe their younger players, Kobe Brown, for example. That's the balancing act here, and I think the Harden situation probably sees more life during the season.
Yep.
If the Clippers feel like, you know what, we're James Harden player away from winning it. Paul and Kawhi are healthy. This guy can put us over the top in the Western Conference, and then maybe you're more reluctant to move off if you feel like maybe you can bring him back. He's not extension eligible, but to sign him as a free agent.
Another team that I think is interesting right now is the Toronto Raptors. With Fred VanVleet moving on to Houston, and now trade rumors are starting to swirl about Pascal Siakam. What are you expecting to see with them moving forward?
Well, it's interesting. They were hurt, certainly with the extension rules with Fred. I mean, they were kind of limited as far as what they wanted to do. Both Pascal and OG are extension eligible. Both could become free agents next year. You cannot be put in a situation where you lose both those guys like you did with Fred, and you're basically you've got Scotty as your face of the franchise here. OG is interesting because he's on a good deal right now, and it's does he want to do 4 for $116? Pascal, you can do the full thing. You can do $192 million here, and I think you can't get to the trade deadline and not have this resolved as far as what direction you want to go in here. And they were the wild card at the trade deadline. They're the wild card right now, just based on there's certainly Gary Trent Jr. is also there on an expiring. What direction do you want to go with this roster here? And those two guys are really good players in their prime. But it's going to cost them. And what's the plan if you're not going to bring them back?
Yeah, that was kind of my feeling was even last year when everyone thought that they were going to be sellers at the trade deadline, they become buyers. But now they have all these really solid players and they're all essentially on reasonable contracts. They can basically go into the season, assess really how good they are with a new coach, And then at the trade deadline, they have all these assets if they do become sellers to make a good deal.
The only challenge with that is that because of Siakam, you trade him in February, you're going to have to wait until free agency to bring him back because of the extension rules are different. Because here's the difference. So next year, when you acquire a player in a trade, you can only extend him for an additional total of 3 seasons. So 2 years and then a 5% raise. Next year, that changes. So now it goes up to 120, and you can add more years. But so if you go out and get Pascal out in February and you're given 3 first-round picks and you can become a free agent, like you get his bird rights, but it's certainly there's a risk involved. That's why, like I said, like if you're going to do it in like November, right, where you still have that 6-month window where you can still extend him.
So you think if we were to see a Siakam trade, it would be more likely to see it sooner rather than at the deadline?
It should.
Yeah,
it should. I think there's more of a priority there just based on where he is as far as with his contract.
What did you think about the Gary Trent opting into the player option? I feel like a lot of people assumed he was going to opt out and explore free agency.
I think it's the same as Jordan Clarkson. I think the market just didn't dictate guys making $18, $19 million. Really only Fred and Dylan Brooks were the guys that signed big money contracts outside of the rookie extension guys that we saw. But I just think that whenever, I said it with Middleton, when he opted out of 40-41, like there's something waiting for him, right? So there's $30 million, and he added more years. He got more security on the back end here, and I just didn't think that opportunity presented for him.
You mentioned Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks. What were your thoughts around those contracts? Because obviously those are some big numbers.
Well, I said on TV, everyone got a big chuckle. I said, hey, man, if you're going to spend 36, you might as well go to 40, right?
That's a good point.
If you got to get to the floor. Now, Jeff Green, 2 years, 16. Jock Landale, 4 for 32. I know the back end are, they're non-guaranteed in years. It was interesting as far as I think, certainly they probably wanted Brook Lopez in there. Dylan's contract's rich. Good for him. He proved a lot of people wrong. People were, his agent, Mike George, we talk a lot. And, Mike, I don't know if you saw when Dylan signed, he put out the tweet in Chinese. Because after the Lakers series, everyone thought he was going to play for who? Shanghai?
Oh, yeah. That was everywhere.
So now he goes out and gets 4 for almost 90. Yep.
That's hilarious.
Yep. But circumstances. It's all circumstances here. It's like, like Murray, DeJounte Murray was traded last year for 2 firsts and swaps and stuff like that. And circumstances. That's just based on sometimes it's about timing.
People always ask, like, who were they competing with? What do you think about that argument?
I understand it. It's what you hear with Kyrie.
Yeah.
Like Kyrie 4 for 120 and it's got some incentives, and people are like, well, who are they competing against? There's nobody at cap space. Well, you do have to respect the player. He's a max player. Now the question is the years, right? Yeah. Like as far as 4 years or 5 years, you don't want to lowball a player and have him come back on a 1-year, $20 million deal, because that just sets the tone. I think you've got to meet, there's got to be a compromise, and both sides got to be comfortable as far as, where you are. But I understand that. Who are they competing against? And there's nobody with cap space, but they're a heck of a player. But you can kind of meet in the middle there.
Yeah. Another interesting one, kind of along the same lines, was after Damian Lillard's trade request, Portland started receiving a lot of negative backlash for the contract that they gave to Jeremy Grant.
Yeah.
The 5 years, $160 million contract. I feel like that's interesting because some people were saying, well, it's not official yet. Just renege on that. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think my thoughts are that Portland knew that there was a strong chance Damian Lillard was going to ask to be traded. And they were comfortable doing the Jeremy Grant contract because we're at 136 cap, then maybe 149, then 165, then 180. Yep. It's going to go. Jump. So Jeremy Grant at 28, 30 in those years.
4 years.
Yeah.
It's not going to be
anything. It's still going to look pretty decent if they ever wanted to move off. But I didn't think it was, they basically just threw everything at Jeremy Grant to convince Damian Lillard. I mean, like, I think he, they knew we're comfortable with Jeremy Grant on the roster if Damian Lillard is not here.
Were you surprised at the length of the 5 years?
Yeah, 5 years is a big number. You rarely
don't see that anymore.
No, you rarely. I think we saw with Duncan Robinson like 5 for 90, in Bertans maybe 5 years. So those are, yeah, I think you have to be careful with that as far as the length there. Brian Windhorst says it best. He says that whenever a player signs a contract, the best thing to do is say, can that contract be traded? That's when you know you have a good contract.
Yeah, I've been hearing. So I think I definitely heard Brian Windhorst say that. I heard someone else say a different variation of that, which was, can they be traded a year from now? So I guess that's the new twist. But regardless, that's a great way of looking at it. We obviously touched on a bunch of teams. Outside of those teams, how would you rate the offseason's biggest winners or losers?
I think the Western Conference is really good. Certainly Denver. Losing Bruce hurts. I like what the Lakers did. Phoenix, certainly. Golden State, they got to get some size. Dallas, I liked here. I think the Eastern Conference, we're kind of in that. Boston will still be good, and Milwaukee should be really good. And who else, out there here? I think there's so much parity in this league. I think you can make an argument for a lot of different teams.
What did you think about the Lakers offseason? And I guess one of the surprises seemed to be the contract Austin Reeves signed. People were expecting him to get an offer sheet, a max offer sheet maybe. What did you think of their offseason overall, and that one specifically?
Yeah, he was eligible for $453, and that's what he got. I think when a team like the Lakers puts that in front of you, it's hard to be in a holding pattern waiting for a team like San Antonio to figure out what they want to do, and then maybe you can get 4 for $80, for example. That's a big risk here. Early bird rights, is you limit as far as how much you can extend for. So I thought there could be a chance, but I thought that, him going back was, here's a player who was undrafted, team signed him, developed him. There's got to be a little bit of a quid pro quo there, and I thought it was a good number for both sides.
I heard someone say, oh, look at the contract that D'Angelo Russell signed and Rui Hachimura signed. If you add them up, it would work in a trade for Kyrie. I haven't done the math to crunch it, but do teams ever think like that?
No, I think it goes back to, is it a tradable contract? I didn't think of Kyrie. Oh my God, it's 35 and Kyrie's making 37. I didn't really kind of. That's some deep thinking there, right? I mean, like, can we just enjoy the summer? like I love my guy Mike Scotto at Hoops Hype.
Yeah.
Like, he's the best and stuff like that. But he put out something about, like, who was it that signed their contract? It was Jeremy Grant. And he was like, he signed a contract. Yeah, there's already speculation that he could be a guy on December 15th. I'm like, Mike, we're July. Just let the guy sign the contract.
Twitter loves trades.
Let him enjoy it here.
That's amazing. You mentioned the Bruce Brown contract with Indiana. I think everyone was quite surprised with the $45 million that he got. Obviously, year 2 came out that it's a team option. What were your thoughts around that number?
Yeah, it's a big. It's one of those teams that had $32 million in room and had to get to the floor. It's a JJ Redick contract. It's a balloon payment here, and now you get a trade-off as a team option. And their roster was already, they had like 13 guys on their contract already when you add their draft. They added a bunch of draft picks, and so you couldn't, going out, and we did this in New Jersey. We had a lot of cap space in 2010, and we split it up on 4 guys. Man, you got to hit hopefully 2 out of the 4.
Right. Yeah.
So you go all in with 1.
Yeah.
You still have a little bit left here. It's just a matter of circumstances.
Yeah. And this day and age, I think 22.5 for someone who's going to hopefully play a pretty decent role on their team.
2 years?
Bring experience on that team. I don't think that's a horrible deal. It seems like a lot just because he didn't make a lot last year, but, he played a great role for a championship-winning team last year, so I don't think it's horrible.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's to your point. It's if you like the guy, you might as well just go get him instead of spreading that money across multiple players. Do you think there's such thing as a championship tax? It's now he's viewed as a winning player. That's going to cost you a bit more. Maybe the market tax.
Yeah, Jeff Green a little bit more too. I think that's the beauty of it. Guys being on a center stage. Bruce hadn't made $15 million his whole career. You probably have to pay a little bit more of a premium. They were restricted as far as what they could sign for him because of their finances here. So there is that championship tax as far as paying a little bit more of a premium.
Bobby, let's close on this. Heading into this summer, Houston was viewed as that pivotal team.
Yeah, the wild card.
The wild card. Let's see what Houston does. They could really shake up things for the other teams. Looking forward to next offseason, are there any major teams that you think we should be keeping an eye on?
You know what? if Orlando is not on a play-in this year, I'd be very disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
And they have positioned themselves big game hunting. So I would keep an eye on them because I think they're getting close. You know, with Paolo and Carter and Franz, the younger players here, they got 2 really nice draft picks here, that they can be in that, I'm not saying going all in, but be in a position where they're not just going out just getting Joe Ingles, who's a really good pickup for them. They're where they can go out and really maybe target a guy. So I think for me, it's probably Orlando, just based on cap space. They've kind of been a little more conservative, but I think as their roster gets better, I think they can become a little bit more aggressive.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, I love that, Bobby. Thanks so much for joining us and for sitting down with us again. We always appreciate you making time for us and all the insights. It's a great conversation. Enjoy the rest of your time here in Vegas and Summer League. And for the viewers, thank you guys for tuning in. Until next time, be sure to check us out on NoTradeClause.com. Give us a follow on YouTube. Give us a follow on Twitter. And don't forget to tune in next time. Until then, thank you guys.